Vatican City has been in the public eye a lot more than usual lately. First, Conclave took the world by storm and even won an Oscar. And almost immediately afterward, the ACTUAL College of Cardinals had to get together to pick another papal successor. It's always a crazy time to be pope, I'm sure, but this most recent run seems straight out of a storybook. With increased notoriety comes a whole lot of questions, and we're here to answer them. It's time for 100 facts about the Pope, to get your Pope knowledge up. Let's get into it. Number 1. According to Catholic tradition, St. Peter was the first pope, personally appointed by Jesus as leader of the apostles. The Bible quotes Jesus telling Peter, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church," which Catholics interpret as establishing the papacy. Peter is therefore considered the first bishop of Rome and the spiritual forefather of all popes. Number 2. St. Peter's martyrdom in Rome cements his legacy in papal history. Tradition holds that Peter was crucified upside down under Emperor Nero around 64 AD, feeling unworthy to die in the same manner as Christ. He was buried on Vatican Hill, and today St. Peter's Basilica is built atop what is believed to be his tomb. In fact, excavations in the 1940s to 60s unearthed bones that Pope Paul VI declared were convincingly identified as Peter's relics. Number 3. The word pope comes from papa, Latin or Greek for father. In early Christianity, pope was a general honorific for bishops. Even the Patriarch of Alexandria used the title. It wasn't exclusive to the Bishop of Rome until much later. The first recorded use for a Roman bishop was in the late 3rd century for Pope Marcellinus, and by 1073, Pope Gregory VII formally decreed that only the Bishop of Rome should be called Papa. Number 4. For the Church's first few centuries, being pope often meant being a martyr. By tradition, 27 of the first 31 popes died violently under Roman persecution, starting with Peter himself. Christianity was illegal until the 4th century, so early bishops of Rome like Pope Sixtus II, executed in 258, paid for their faith with their lives. This pattern finally eased after Christianity was legalized in 313 AD by Emperor Constantine. Number 5. The legalization of Christianity, Edict of Milan, 313 AD, transformed the papacy's status. No longer fugitives, popes began to wield civil influence. In 452, one pope famously stepped into global affairs. Pope Leo I, Leo the Great, met Attila the Hun and, according to tradition, dissuaded him from attacking Rome. Leo also powerfully asserted Rome's spiritual primacy. At the Council of Chalcedon in 451, his doctrinal letter was so authoritative that bishops exclaimed, "Peter has spoken through Leo," affirming the pope's rule. Number 6. One of the Pope's ancient titles, Pontifex Maximus, reveals a link to pre-Christian Rome. The term, Latin for greatest bridge builder, was once held by Roman emperors as chief priests of the old religion. Emperor Gratian renounced the pagan title in the late 4th century, and eventually medieval popes adopted it. By the Renaissance in the 1400s, popes regularly styled themselves Pontifex Maximus to evoke the grandeur of Rome's imperial past. You can still see Pont Max on many papal inscriptions and coins. Number 7. Pope Gregory I, Gregory the Great, 590 to 604, proved how essential the papacy could be in a collapsing world. With Italy ravaged by plague, famine, and war after Rome's fall, Gregory, a former city prefect, used the church's resources to feed the populace and administer the city. He organized grain distributions from papal estates and set up a monthly food supply for Rome's poor. Gregory's leadership, which also included church reforms and missionary campaigns, earned him sainthood and the title Great. Number 8. The popes gradually assumed temporal power in addition to spiritual leadership. A milestone was the donation of Pepin in 756, when Frankish King Pepin the Short granted the Pope control of extensive lands in central Italy. This deal, essentially swapping church endorsement of Pepin's kingship for territory, created the Papal States, making the Pope a land-holding monarch. The Papal States would endure for over 1100 years until 1870, giving the popes an unusual dual role as both religious and secular rulers. Number 9. On Christmas Day in 800, the Pope dramatically reshaped geopolitics. Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans in St. Peter's Basilica. This moment revived the title of Roman Emperor in the West, birthing the Holy Roman Empire, and established that papal approval was the gateway to imperial legitimacy. By placing a crown on Charlemagne's head, or rather, as legend holds, Charlemagne taking the crown and crowning himself in Leo's presence, the papacy asserted symbolic authority, even over kings. Subsequent popes would often leverage this precedent in power struggles with monarchs. Number 10. Not all popes led holy lives. The 10th century papacy was marked by scandal and violence, a period so notorious it's called the pornocracy, or rule of harlots. Between 904 and 964, Rome's powerful Theophylact family, particularly the ambitious Marozia and her mother Theodora, controlled the papacy, installing a series of puppet popes. Popes during this era, like John XII, gained infamy for debauchery and corruption. John XII was only about 18 when made pope and was accused of sordid behavior. He allegedly turned the Lateran Palace into a brothel. He met an equally ignominious end. Legend says he died in bed with another man's wife. This dark chapter in papal history shows that not all pontiffs were saintly. Number 11. Perhaps the strangest papal tribunal ever convened was the Cadaver Synod of 897. In that macabre event, Pope Stephen VI ordered the exhumation of his deceased predecessor, Pope Formosus, had the corpse dressed in papal vestments, and put it on trial in Rome. The rotting Formosus was accused of perjury and other crimes. Unsurprisingly, he mounted no defense except for a deacon appointed to speak for him. Stephen VI condemned the corpse, declared Formosus's acts null, cut off the cadaver's blessing fingers, and threw the body into the Tiber River. This grotesque trial horrified observers. It backfired on Stephen. A few months later, he was deposed and strangled in prison by enraged factions. Number 12. A major rift in Christianity occurred in 1054, with the Great Schism between East and West. That year, Pope Leo IX's envoys marched into Hagia Sophia in Constantinople and placed a papal bull of excommunication on the altar, aimed at the Patriarch of Constantinople, Michael Cyrillarius. The Patriarch responded by excommunicating the papal legates. This dramatic exchange, though not instantly recognized as permanent, came to symbolize the East-West Schism, splitting the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. The feud had been long brewing over differences in theology, liturgy, even the use of leavened versus unleavened bread, and especially papal authority. Efforts at reconciliation since have never fully healed the millennium-old divide. Number 13. The investiture controversy of the 11th century showcased the medieval papacy at its boldest. In 1075, Pope Gregory VII asserted the right to appoint or invest bishops, angering the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV. When Henry insisted on his traditional rights, Gregory excommunicated him. The clash climaxed in 1077 at Canossa, Italy. Henry IV trekked through snow to the castle where Gregory was staying and stood barefoot in the winter cold for 3 days, begging forgiveness. This famous walk to Canossa ended with the Pope lifting the excommunication, a stunning example of an emperor humbling himself before a pope. Though Henry later revived the dispute, Canossa became a symbol of papal supremacy at its height, when even kings bowed to papal spiritual authority. Number 14. The popes were power brokers in the Crusades. In 1095, Pope Urban II ignited the First Crusade with one of history's most influential speeches. At the Council of Clermont in France, he called upon Christian nobles and knights to liberate Jerusalem and aid Byzantium against Muslim forces, rallying them with the cry, Deus vult, God wills it. The response was immense. Tens of thousands took up the cross, embarking on the First Crusade, which ultimately captured Jerusalem. Urban II's call, promising spiritual rewards for crusaders, demonstrated how a pope could muster Christendom into action. Later popes would organize further crusades, not always successfully. But the Crusades cemented the papacy's role as the ultimate rallying voice of Latin Christendom in the Middle Ages. Number 15. The medieval papacy's zenith is often associated with Pope Innocent III. Innocent III was one of the most powerful popes ever. He believed the pope stood like the sun in the sky, with kings as the moon reflecting papal light. He exercised this authority broadly, placing entire kingdoms under interdict, suspending all church services to pressure monarchs, deposing kings. He forced Francis Philip II to take back a lawful wife and excommunicated England's King John, even declaring John's throne forfeit until he submitted. Innocent launched crusades, including the fourth, albeit that went awry and sacked Constantinople in 1204, and convened the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, which was a landmark in church law and doctrine. Under Innocent III, papal supremacy over the church and to an extent over secular rulers reached an apogee. Number 16. Not all documents supporting papal power were authentic. A famous example is the Donation of Constantine, a document which supposedly recorded Emperor Constantine in the 4th century granting the Pope authority over the Western Roman Empire. For centuries, the papacy and its allies used the donation as evidence of papal temporal supremacy. It wasn't exposed as a forgery until the 15th century, when scholar Lorenzo Valla performed linguistic analysis and showed the Latin text could not be from Constantine's era. Valla's 1440 expose proved the document was written much later, in the 8th century, a major embarrassment to the church, although by then the papacy's legal claims no longer relied on that document. The donation forgery remains a classic case of a historical fraud that bolstered papal claims until debunked. Number 17. By the 14th century, the papacy's prestige took a hit. In 1303, Pope Boniface VIII, who had declared extreme papal authority in a bull, was seized by French agents in the outrage of Anagni. King Philip IV of France, locked in a power struggle with Boniface, sent men to arrest him. They even slapped the aging pope during a brief captivity. Although locals freed him after 2 days, he was shaken and died within a month. This episode symbolized the waning of papal dominance. A pope was physically bullied by a king's ministers. Soon after, in 1309, Boniface's successor moved the papal court to France, beginning the Avignon papacy. Number 18. The Avignon papacy, from 1309 to 1377, saw 7 popes reside in Avignon, then under French influence instead of Rome. This 68-year exile, later dubbed the Babylonian captivity of the papacy, began when Pope Clement V, a Frenchman, chose to base himself in Avignon to escape factional violence in Rome. While in Avignon, the papal court fell under the sway of the French crown. All the Avignon popes were French and often appointed French cardinals. The papacy's absence from Rome scandalized many Europeans. Saint Catherine of Siena was among those pleading for the pope's return. Finally, in 1377, Pope Gregory XI returned to Rome, but this Babylonian captivity badly damaged the papacy's credibility and set the stage for even greater turmoil, the Western Schism. Number 19. Right after the Avignon exile, the church plunged into the Great Western Schism from 1378 to 1417, an era with multiple rival popes. It started in 1378 when Italians and French cardinals split over electing a successor to Gregory XI. One pope, Urban VI, reigned in Rome, while dissenting cardinals elected Clement VII as a rival pope in Avignon. For nearly 4 decades, 2, sometimes 3 men at once claimed to be the true pope, each with their own college of cardinals and support from different European rulers. At one point, there was a pope in Rome, an anti-pope in Avignon, and after the Council of Pisa, 1409, intended to solve the issue, a third claimant, the Pisa line, which only made matters worse. The schism caused enormous scandal and confusion among the faithful. It was eventually resolved at the Council of Constance, 1414 to 1418, which forced the abdication or deposed the competing popes, and in 1417 elected a compromise candidate, Pope Martin V, ending the schism. The Western Schism's lesson in humility led the papacy to be more cautious in wielding power thereafter. Number 20. The Renaissance popes of the 15th to 16th centuries were powerful patrons of the arts, but also notorious for worldliness. A striking example is Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, 1492 to 1503. Alexander VI openly acknowledged several illegitimate children, including the infamous Cesar and Lucrezia Borgia. He practiced shameless nepotism, appointing at least 10 relatives as cardinals, and allegedly secured his own election through bribery. Under his watch, the Vatican hosted lavish and lewd parties. One account describes the Banquet of Chestnuts in 1501, where 50 courtesans crawled naked on the floor, picking up chestnuts in front of the Pope and his children, an event recorded by a papal master of ceremonies. Alexander VI's reign was so scandalous that it fueled calls for church reform. Yet he was also a patron of artists and issued the 1493 bulls dividing the New World between Spain and Portugal. The Borgia Pope remains infamous as a symbol of a corrupt Renaissance papacy. Number 21. Not all Renaissance popes were passive pleasure seekers. Some were fiery and militaristic. Pope Julius II, known as the Warrior Pope, personally led troops in battle to expand and defend the Papal States. Julius donned armor and besieged cities, earning the dubious honor of being the only pope depicted wielding a sword in some artworks. In between wars, however, Julius II became one of history's great art patrons. He commissioned Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling in 1508 and hired Raphael to beautify the Vatican rooms. He also laid the foundation stone for the new St. Peter's Basilica in 1506, beginning the construction of the magnificent church that stands today. It's said that Julius's forceful personality bullied even Michelangelo into greatness. Under this warrior pope, the papacy demonstrated both temporal might and cultural leadership of the High Renaissance. Number 22. A colorful legacy of Pope Julius II is the Swiss Guard, the corps of Swiss soldiers who still protect the Vatican. In 1506, Julius II invited 150 Swiss mercenaries to Rome as his personal guard. Impressed by their discipline and bravery, the Pontifical Swiss Guard has existed ever since, making it one of the world's oldest standing military units. They are famous for their Renaissance-style striped uniforms, often mistakenly attributed to Michelangelo, though the modern design was actually created in 1914, and their traditional halberds. The Swiss Guard's dedication was immortalized during the 1527 sack of Rome. On May 6, 1527, 147 Swiss guards died defending Pope Clement VII from the attacking troops of Emperor Charles V. Thanks to their sacrifice, Clement escaped through a secret passage to Castel Sant'Angelo. Number 23. Today, new Swiss guards are sworn in every May 6th, honoring those who fell. They continue to serve as both ceremonial guards and real security for the Pope. Number 24. Ironically, a major trigger for the Protestant Reformation was a papal fundraising project. In 1517, Pope Leo X, a Medici pope known for extravagance, was financing the costly construction of St. Peter's Basilica by promoting the sale of indulgences, grants remitting punishment for sins in exchange for contributions. A Dominican friar, Johann Tetzel, marketed these indulgences across Germany with the jingle, "As soon as a coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs." This crass commercialization outraged a German monk, Martin Luther, who on October 31st, 1517, published his 95 Theses protesting the abuse. Leo X initially dismissed Luther, reportedly saying, "Since God has given us the papacy, let us enjoy it," reflecting his easygoing approach. But Luther's movement caught fire, and in 1521, Leo X excommunicated him. Nevertheless, the split had begun. Ironically, the very indulgence campaign meant to glorify the papacy ended up fueling a religious revolution that permanently fractured Western Christianity and curtailed papal authority in many regions. Number 25. The Reformation also had political dimensions. King Henry VIII of England's break with Rome was entwined with a papal dispute. In 1527, Henry VIII sought an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, but Pope Clement VII, facing pressure from Catherine's nephew, Emperor Charles V, refused. After 6 years of deadlock, Henry in 1534 rejected papal jurisdiction and declared himself head of the Church of England. Clement VII thus inadvertently became the Pope under whom England left Catholicism. Number 26. Earlier, Clement VII had suffered the sack of Rome in 1527, when Charles V's mutinous troops rampaged through Rome. The Pope had to hole up in Castel Sant'Angelo as the city was looted and clergy were killed. Number 27. Stung by the Reformation, the Catholic Church responded with the Counter-Reformation, led in part by popes committed to reform. A pivotal event was the Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563. Convened under Popes Paul III, Julius III, and Pius IV. This council reaffirmed core Catholic doctrines, such as the importance of both scripture and tradition, and all 7 sacraments, and enacted sweeping internal reforms. It tackled abuses by requiring better priestly training, enforcing residency of bishops, and condemning the sale of indulgences, while upholding their spiritual merit when properly given. Number 28. Trent also standardized the Mass and liturgy. The Tridentine Latin Mass would remain essentially unchanged until the 20th century. The Council of Trent gave the papacy and church a clear, disciplined blueprint to counter Protestant teachings. Popes of the Counter-Reformation then implemented these decrees, leading to a revival of Catholicism in many areas. Number 29. By the 18th century, the papacy often found itself at odds with rising secular powers and new ideas. In 1798, Pope Pius VI learned how vulnerable the papal throne had become when French revolutionary troops, under General Berthier, invaded Rome. They declared a Roman republic and took Pius prisoner. The elderly pope was exiled to France, where he died in 1799. Number 30. His successor, Pope Pius VII, fared little better initially. Though he crowned Napoleon emperor in 1804, Napoleon later quarreled with him and in 1809 arrested him, holding him captive for about 5 years. Pius VII returned to Rome only after Napoleon's fall in 1814. These events showed the papacy's diminished worldly power, from a kingmaker crowning emperors to a prisoner of a European conqueror, all within a few years. Number 31. One dramatic incident at Napoleon's coronation illustrated the changing dynamic between popes and rulers. Pius VII agreed to travel to Paris in 1804 to crown Napoleon, a bold gesture since no pope had left Italy in centuries. But during the ceremony at Notre Dame, Napoleon took the crown from the pope's hands and crowned himself emperor. This signaled that Napoleon saw his authority as self-derived, not granted by the church. Although Pius VII went along with the ritual and anointed Napoleon, the imagery of a pope being upstaged was powerful. Tensions grew until Napoleon seized the papal states and detained the pontiff. It wasn't until after Napoleon's defeat that the papal states were restored to Pius VII. The papacy survived the Napoleonic storm, but its aura of political invincibility did not. Number 32. The 19th century saw the papacy transition from a regional monarch to a more spiritual role amid Italian unification. Pope Pius IX, who reigned from 1846 to 1878, was the longest reigning pope, and initially a liberal reformer, but he became increasingly conservative after upheavals in 1848 drove him from Rome. Crucially, he presided over the First Vatican Council, 1869 to 1870, which defined the dogma of papal infallibility, declaring that the Pope, when speaking ex cathedra on faith or morals, is preserved from error by the Holy Spirit. This meant that under very specific conditions, the Pope can pronounce teachings that are binding and unquestionable for Catholics. The Council's approval of infallibility in 1870 was controversial at the time. Some bishops opposed it and left. A few Catholics even broke away, forming the Old Catholic movement. But it solidified the Pope's spiritual authority as supreme within the Church. Notably, since 1870, popes have used this infallible teaching authority extremely rarely. One clear case was in 1950, when Pius XII infallibly defined the Assumption of Mary. Number 33. In 1870, Pope Pius IX also experienced a crushing blow to the papacy's temporal power. the loss of Rome, and the Papal States. Italian nationalist troops conquered Rome in September 1870, completing the unification of Italy and ending the Pope's thousand-year rule over central Italy. Pius IX refused to accept the new Kingdom of Italy's authority in Rome. He withdrew behind the Vatican walls and declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican, a status that popes maintained for nearly 60 years. Popes from Pius IX through Pius XI did not leave the tiny Vatican enclave, hoping their self-imposed captivity would pressure Italy to negotiate. It wasn't until 1929 that the stalemate, known as the Roman Question, was resolved. Number 34. The resolution came with the Lateran Treaty of 1929, signed by Pope Pius XI and Italian leader Benito Mussolini. This landmark treaty created Vatican City as an independent sovereign state, just 108 acres, under papal ownership, and in return the papacy recognized the Kingdom of Italy with Rome as its capital. Italy provided financial indemnity to the Church for the lost papal states and granted the Pope special status. Thus, the Pope became a head of a modern microstate, the world's smallest country, and the prisoner of the Vatican period ended. The Lateran Pact also made Catholicism the state religion of Italy, a provision that has since been modified. Today, thanks to the Lateran Treaty, the Pope functions as both a religious leader and a monarch of Vatican City, issuing passports, sending ambassadors, and managing a state, albeit a tiny one. Number 35. One curious legacy of the old papal states is that capital punishment was practiced under papal rule. The papal states had an official executioner. The most famous was Giovanni Battista Bugatti, nicknamed Mastro Tita, who served as executioner from 1796 to 1864 and executed 516 people under successive popes. He carried out sentences for murder, banditry, etc., usually by guillotine in later years. The Vatican eventually renounced the death penalty. It was formally removed from Vatican City's laws in 1969 under Paul VI. The last person executed by a papal government was in 1870, just before Rome's takeover. It's jarring to imagine today, but the same papacy that now campaigns against capital punishment once employed an executioner to enforce its justice. Number 36. The 20th century popes faced global conflicts and internal crises. Pope Pius XII led the Church through World War II, but remains a controversial figure. Critics argue that he stayed too silent about Nazi atrocities, failing to explicitly condemn the Holocaust while it was happening. They point to his public statements, which were often vague. For instance, he spoke in general terms about compassion and injustice, but never named the Jews or Nazis in his wartime Christmas radio messages. Defenders claim he worked behind the scenes to save Jewish lives through clandestine instructions to churches and monasteries to shelter refugees, and feared public denunciations would provoke Nazi retaliation. This debate earned him labels from Hitler's Pope in polemical literature to righteous Gentile in some Jewish testimonials. In recent years, the Vatican opened Pius XII's archives to researchers to clarify his record. The full verdict of history is still being written, but his dilemmas illustrate the papacy's tightrope in times of unprecedented evil. Number 37. After World War II, the papacy underwent a transformation with Pope John XXIII. Far from being a mere caretaker pope, he was elected at age 76. John XXIII launched a revolution in the Church by convening the Second Vatican Council in 1962. He famously said he wanted to open the windows of the Church and let in some fresh air. This Second Council indeed brought sweeping reforms. It allowed Mass to be celebrated in vernacular languages instead of Latin, to the delight of many faithful, encouraged lay people to take active roles in the Church, promoted dialogue with other Christians and non-Christian religions, and updated attitudes on religious freedom and the modern world. The changes were so significant that ever since, the Church has been described as pre-Vatican II and post-Vatican II. Pope John XXIII died in 1963 before the council finished, but his successor, Paul VI, carried it to completion. His bold initiative rejuvenated the Catholic Church's engagement with the world and earned him the affectionate title Good Pope John, and eventually sainthood in 2014. Number 38. Not everyone welcomed the changes of Vatican II. A conservative backlash led to a minor schism. Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, a French traditionalist, rejected the new Mass and reforms. In 1988, Lefebvre defied Pope John Paul II by consecrating 4 bishops without papal mandate, resulting in his excommunication. Lefebvre's movement, the Society of St. Pius X, continued celebrating the Old Tridentine Latin Mass and opposing what it viewed as liberal errors of Vatican II. This illustrated the papacy's challenge in the modern era, trying to balance renewal with tradition. In recent years, the Vatican has made efforts to reconcile some Lefebvrist followers, but the episode showed that even as the papacy embraced change, it risked alienating those who saw the change as betrayal. Number 39. In 1978, the Church experienced the Year of 3 Popes. After Pope Paul VI died, the Cardinals elected Pope John Paul I in August of 1978. He charmed the world with his humility and smile. He was called the Smiling Pope, and he was the first to take a double name, honoring his 2 predecessors, Paul VI and John XXIII. Shockingly, however, John Paul I died just 33 days into his pontificate on September 28, 1978, of an apparent heart attack. His sudden death, found in bed with unfinished reading material, spurred numerous conspiracy theories suggesting foul play, though no evidence supports this. Despite his brief reign, John Paul I left an impression of simplicity and warmth. He declined the traditional papal coronation and mitre, opting for a simple inauguration. To this day, he remains one of the shortest reigning popes, and in 2022, he was declared blessed on the path to sainthood. Number 40. The 3rd Pope of 1978 was Pope John Paul II, and he was a pope of many firsts. When Cardinal Karol Wojtyla of Krakow was elected on October 16, 1978, he became the first non-Italian pope in 455 years, since Adrian VI in 1523, breaking the Italian monopoly on the papacy. He was also the first ever Slavic pope and the first from Poland. John Paul II's election sent shockwaves through the communist Eastern Bloc. Here was a pope from behind the Iron Curtain, as Pope John Paul II became a spiritual catalyst in the fall of communism. During a landmark 1979 visit to his native Poland, he inspired millions with messages like "Do not be afraid," bolstering the Solidarity movement's confidence against the Soviet-backed regime. Former Soviet leader Gorbachev later said, "The collapse of the Iron Curtain would have been impossible without John Paul II." Beyond politics, John Paul II was a vigorous evangelist who traveled the globe, earning the nickname Pilgrim Pope, and a staunch upholder of Catholic doctrine. His non-Italian background and immense charisma truly globalized the papacy's reach and influence. Number 41. John Paul II took the papacy to the people like never before. He was history's most traveled pope, visiting 129 countries during 104 foreign trips and logging over 700,000 miles in pastoral journeys. He could draw enormous crowds. Famously, an estimated 5 million attended his Mass in Manila, Philippines in 1995, one of the largest human gatherings ever at that time. John Paul II leveraged mass media, from live television broadcasts to giant Youth Day rallies, to be a visible shepherd to the world. He also spoke multiple languages. By his death, he had addressed audiences in over 50. These travels and media appearances made the papacy more visible and beloved on the world stage than ever. It's often said that more people saw John Paul II in person than any prior pope in history, thanks to jet travel. This helped reinvigorate global Catholic identity, especially among young people, who he invited to massive World Youth Day celebrations. No pope before had been so constantly on the move. Number 42. John Paul II also had quite a dramatic brush with death. On May 13, 1981, as he rode in an open jeep through St. Peter's Square greeting pilgrims, a gunman shot the Pope at close range. The shooter, Mehmet Ali Ashka, hit John Paul II with 4 bullets, severely wounding him in the abdomen and arm. In a remarkable saga, surgeons saved the Pope's life. 1 bullet missed a major artery by millimeters. John Paul II credited the Virgin Mary's intercession. The assassination attempt happened on the Feast of Our Lady of Fatima, and he later placed one of the extracted bullets in the crown of the Fatima Shrine statue. Number 43. Even more extraordinary, John Paul II forgave his assailant. In 1983, he visited Ashka in prison, spoke with him privately, and forgave him, an image that captivated the world. Ashka himself was baffled by the Pope's compassion. John Paul II's recovery and forgiveness underscored his message of mercy. He went on to serve another 24 years after the shooting, though he suffered from its effects and later Parkinson's disease. The attempt on his life prompted the Vatican to enhance papal security, including more frequent use of a bulletproof Pope-mobile. Number 44. During his long pontificate, John Paul II canonized more saints than perhaps all of his predecessors combined, over 480. He also issued influential teachings, from solidifying moral doctrines to pioneering a theology of the body. By the early 21st century, however, the Church was rocked by revelations of widespread clergy sexual abuse. John Paul II, in his final years, apologized for the sins of church members and summoned American cardinals in 2002 when the U.S. abuse scandal broke. His successor, Pope Benedict XVI, took even more concrete action. Between 2005 and 2013, Benedict laicized or defrocked hundreds of abusive priests, nearly 400 in just 2011 and 2012 alone. Benedict was the first pope to meet with abuse survivors, and he issued strict norms to punish offenders. Yet criticism persisted that the Church's response was slow and insufficient. In 2019, Pope Francis convened an unprecedented global summit of bishops in Rome to address abuse, signaling that confronting this crisis is a top papal authority. The abuse scandal remains the most serious internal challenge to papal authority and credibility in living memory, a humbling reminder that the Pope's duty to protect the innocent is as paramount as any doctrine. Number 45. The papacy took a truly historic run in February of 2013, when Pope Benedict XVI announced his resignation, the first pope to abdicate in nearly 600 years. The last papal resignation had been Gregory XII in 1415 during the Council of Constance, so Benedict's decision stunned the world. Citing advanced age and declining strength at 85, Benedict XVI humbly stated that he could no longer adequately fulfill the ministry. On February 28, 2013, he stepped down and assumed the title Pope Emeritus. This voluntary resignation set a modern precedent that popes are not absolutely required to die in office. Benedict retired to a quiet life of study and prayer in a Vatican monastery until his death in 2022. His papacy from 2005 to 2013 had been marked by theological scholarship, a brilliant professor pope, and by efforts to re-evangelize Europe. But ironically, it is his manner of leaving office that may prove most consequential, showing that the papal office can change hands in an orderly way without a death. After Benedict's exit, the conclave elected Pope Francis, demonstrating a seamless transition. Number 46. The election of Pope Francis in March of 2013 was groundbreaking. Francis is the first Latin American pope, the first pope from the New World, born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and also the first member of the Jesuit order to become pope. He took the regnal name of Francis to honor Saint Francis of Assisi, signaling a focus on humility and the poor. From the start, Pope Francis exhibited a very informal, down-to-earth style. Notably, he refused to live in the ornate apostolic palace. Instead, he resided in Vatican's simple guest house, Casa Santa Marta, eating in the common dining room and celebrating daily mass with Vatican staff. He eschewed the traditional red papal shoes and fancy attire, opting for plain white garments. In his first appearance as pope, he greeted the crowd with a simple "Buonasera," good evening, and asked the people to bless him before he gave his blessing. This approachable manner and emphasis on modesty quickly made him popular far beyond Catholic circles. Number 47. Pope Francis made advocacy for the vulnerable and care for the planet central to his agenda. In 2015, he published Laudato Si, the first papal encyclical focused on environmental issues and climate change, calling for stewardship of creation and action on global warming. He spoke often on economic justice, critiquing unfettered capitalism and urging compassion for the poor and migrants. Francis also launched new initiatives like commissioning a study on the possibility of women deacons and expanding roles for laity in church governance. In 2016, he took the unprecedented step of inviting Syrian refugees to fly back with him to Rome after visiting a refugee camp, personally housing them in the Vatican. Such gestures underscore his vision of a poor church for the poor. His priorities earned him accolades, Times Person of the Year, nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize, but also criticism from those who feel he should have focused more on internal doctrinal clarity. Still, Francis's social emphasis repositioned the papacy as a moral voice on issues like climate change, human rights, and inequality on the world stage. Number 48. Pope Francis's pastoral tone on hot-button issues had sparked both praise and controversy. Famously, when asked in 2013 about gay Catholics, Francis responded, "Who am I to judge?" implying that if a person is sincerely seeking God, their orientation isn't for him to condemn. This marked a sharp change in tone, though not doctrine, from previous papal statements on homosexuality, and was seen as a more merciful approach. Similarly, Francis urged the Church to be more welcoming to those who have felt excluded, such as divorced and civilly remarried Catholics, suggesting they not be treated as pariahs and cautiously opening a path for some to receive communion under guidance. He also de-emphasized culture war language, focusing instead on caring accompaniment. Conservative critics worried that Francis's approach created confusion or diluted Catholic teachings, pointing to ambiguous statements and a perceived leniency on moral issues. Progressives, however, lauded his efforts to make the church more inclusive and compassionate. The tension has led to various debates within the church, even a few open letters of concern from scholars and bishops. Through it all, Francis has called for unity and dialogue, reminding that charity is paramount even in disagreement. His papacy showed how the Pope today must navigate not only global issues, but also sharp internal divides. Number 49. Throughout history, certain quirky traditions have highlighted the papacy's unique character. For example, at the coronation of a new pope, a ritual not held since 1963, a master of ceremonies would hold up a piece of burning flax and proclaim, "Holy Father, thus passes the glory of the world." The flax would quickly turn to ash, a dramatic reminder to the pope of his mortality and the fleeting nature of earthly grandeur. Number 50. Another odd tradition. It's long been claimed that medieval popes sat on a special chair with a hole as part of the installation, supposedly to verify the pope's gender, after the legendary Pope Joan fiasco. In reality, while such ancient chairs do exist, historians say that they were not actually used to check for male genitalia. That's part of the Pope Joan myth. Still, the fact that the legend persisted and that the Vatican kept those chairs shows the colorful folklore around the papacy. Modern popes have dropped these medieval theatrics, but they remain part of papal lore. Number 51. Speaking of, Pope Joan is the infamous mythical female pope. According to a later medieval tale, first appearing around the 13th century, an English woman disguised as a man allegedly became Pope John VIII in the 850s and reigned for over 2 years. The story goes that Pope Joan was only outed when she went into unexpected labor during a papal procession, whereupon she died, some versions say killed by an angry mob. This legend was widely believed for centuries. It fueled Protestant polemics and even led to the supposed precaution of verifying a new pope's sex. In truth, no contemporary evidence of a female pope exists, and papal lists have no gap where Joan would fit. The Catholic Church considers it a myth. Number 52. Interestingly, the pierced chair we mentioned earlier does exist, but scholars say that it had a prosaic use in ancient ceremonies. Number 53. Many popes have names that echo through history, but none has dared to be Peter II. By tradition, out of reverence for St. Peter, no pope takes the name Peter again. In fact, the official list of popes count Peter as the first and leaves Peter II unused. The practice of popes changing their name began in 533 AD. Pope John II was the first to adopt a new papal name because his birth name was Mercurius, after the Roman god Mercury, which he deemed inappropriate for a pope. Since then, almost every pope has chosen a regnal name, different from his baptismal name. One exception, in 1555, Marcellus II kept his own name. Popular papal names include John, the most common, used by 21 popes, Gregory and Benedict, 16 each, and Clement, 14. The high numbering can get confusing. For example, there is no actual Pope John XX, a numbering error around the time of the schism, so John 21st was actually the 20th John. When Jorge Bergoglio chose Francis in 2013, it was the first use of that name, reflecting a new direction. The naming custom allows each pope to signal the legacy or values he wants to embody, much like a king taking a throne name. Number 54. Every pope is also the sovereign of Vatican City, making him a political head of state. Vatican City is the smallest country in the world. The pope holds absolute executive, legislative, and judicial power within this mini-state, an elected monarch with full authority. In practice, the pope delegates governance to officials, like the governorate of Vatican City, but legally he could rule by decree. Vatican City has its own euro currency, coins featuring the pope's image, its own postal system, media, and even a football team of museum guards and employees. It is a unique theocratic monarchy. Number 55. Interestingly, Latin remains an official language of the Holy See, and this is evidenced by touches like the Vatican Bank's ATM machines offering Latin as a language option, where you might see Latin for "please insert your card" on the screen. The Pope, as a head of state, also has diplomatic immunity and receives every honor given to a sovereign, yet unlike other monarchs, his kingdom exists solely to support his spiritual mission. Number 56. The Holy See, the juridical entity of the Pope and Curia, maintains one of the world's oldest diplomatic networks. The Pope sends papal nuncios, ambassadors, to over 180 countries, and in many nations, the papal nuncio is automatically the dean of the diplomatic corps by protocol. The Holy See also holds a unique observer status at the United Nations, speaking out on issues of peace, poverty, and human dignity. Popes have used this platform. Pope Paul VI was the first to address the UN in 1965. He famously pleaded, "No more war. War never again." Pope John Paul II addressed the UN twice in 1979 and 1995, and Pope Francis did so in 2015. This diplomatic role harkens back to times when popes mediated between powers. For instance, Alexander VI brokered the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas, dividing new lands between Spain and Portugal. Today, while the Pope has no armies, aside from the Swiss Guard of course, he wields soft power, moral and diplomatic influence. Vatican diplomats were even instrumental in events like mediating the 2014 thaw between the US and Cuba. Thus, the Pope, though ruling a tiny territory, is a significant player on the world stage. Number 57. Communication technology has continually expanded the papacy's reach. In 1931, Pope Pius XI inaugurated Vatican Radio, with inventor Guglielmo Marconi setting up the transmitter, allowing the Pope's voice to be heard across the globe for the first time. Pope Pius XII in the 1940s delivered radio messages, including wartime addresses. Fast forward to the internet age. In December of 2012, Pope Benedict XVI became the first pope to join Twitter, tweeting a greeting of thanks and blessings. His handle, @Pontifex, was then inherited by Pope Francis, who has since amassed over 18 million followers across multiple language accounts. Popes use Twitter to send bite-sized spiritual thoughts or appeals, a decidedly modern version of spreading the gospel. Number 58. The Vatican also uses YouTube, Instagram, and other media. Compare this to the Renaissance, when news of a new pope's election would travel for weeks by horse. Today, the Pope can communicate in real time. Each advancement, from radio and television broadcasts of papal events to jet travel enabling pastoral visits to social media, has made the papal presence more immediate in people's lives worldwide. Number 59. The Conclave, the secret election of a new pope by the College of Cardinals, comes with its own fascinating customs. Cardinals are literally locked in to ensure secrecy. Conclave means with key. Since 1878, the voting has taken place in the Sistine Chapel. After each round of ballots, the papers are burned. If no candidate has reached the required 2/3 majority, chemicals are added to produce black smoke that billows from the chimney, signaling to the outside world, no pope yet. When a pope is finally elected, the ballots are burned alone, sending up white smoke, the joyous signal of success. Shortly after, the senior deacon appears on the basilica balcony to declare Habemus Papam, we have a pope, and introduces the new pontiff, who then gives his first Urbi et Orbi blessing. Number 60. The smoke ritual has occasionally caused confusion. For instance, in 1958 and 1978, the smoke color was ambiguous, leaving crowds unsure for a few minutes, but it remains a beloved tradition. Fun fact, the stove and chimney used in the conclave are themselves blessed and installed with ceremony, showing how even the smallest aspects of a papal election are steeped in significance. Number 61. Over the centuries, conclaves have varied wildly in length. The longest papal election on record dragged on for nearly 3 years, from 1268 to 1271 in Viterbo, as cardinals were deadlocked. The local magistrates, frustrated with the delay, resorted to extreme measures. They locked the cardinals in, removed the roof of the palace to expose them to the elements, and put the eminences on a diet of bread and water. This pressure eventually led to the election of Pope Gregory X. In response, Gregory established strict rules to govern conclaves, including isolation and reduced rations, the template for the modern conclave procedure. On the other end of the spectrum, some conclaves have been very fast. The quickest in the last few centuries was 1939, when Pius XII was elected in just 3 ballots over 2 days. Today's conclaves generally last only a few days. Number 62. One medieval twist no longer allowed, Catholic monarchs used to claim a veto right. For example, in 1903, Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria vetoed the leading candidate, Cardinal Rampolla, through a proxy. The conclave instead chose Pius X, who immediately outlawed the veto for all further conclaves. Since then, no secular power has officially interfered in a papal election. Number 63. Anyone baptized male can technically be elected pope. In theory, the cardinals could choose a layman or even a non-cardinal priest. This has happened in history. Medieval cases where subdeacons or laymen were elected and then quickly ordained. The last man elected pope who was not already a bishop was Pope Urban VI in 1378. He was a local archbishop and not a cardinal at the time. However, for over 500 years, the electors have chosen one of their fellow cardinals. If ever they did pick someone outside, that person would need immediate ordination as a bishop to take office. Church law now requires the pope to be a bishop. The theoretical possibility remains, adding a bit of drama to conclaves. Before his 2013 election, Cardinal Bergoglio half-seriously quipped, "If they elect a non-cardinal, get me out of here. It won't be me." In practice, the red-hatted electors stick to their own, but it underscores that the papacy is an office of divine appointment not bound to human rank. Conceivably, any man the Spirit inspires them to choose could become pope. Number 64. Sainthood and sin have both marked the papal line. Of the 266 popes, about 83 have been declared saints in the Catholic Church. Virtually all the earliest popes were martyred and are venerated as saints. In fact, every pope from St. Peter up to the 6th century, with a few exceptions, is honored as a saint. After around 1300, papal canonizations became far rarer. Popes were entwined in worldly affairs, and sanctity was not presumed. In modern times, a few popes have been canonized or beatified. Saint Pius X, who died in 1914, was canonized in 1954. Saint John XXIII and Saint John Paul II were both canonized in 2014. Number 65. On the flip side, history's worst popes underscore that popes are fallible men. Alexander VI's notorious deeds, for example, have made him a byword word for corruption. Needless to say, he's not on any sainthood roster. The Church teaches that the Pope's personal sins do not undermine the office's spiritual authority, but those dark chapters have certainly provided ammunition for critics. Overall, roughly 1/3 of all popes are revered as saints, reflecting the papacy's early age of martyrs and the Church's high bar for sanctity in leadership. Number 66. Anti-popes. Rival claimants to the papal throne are a curious feature of papal history. By the official count, there have been more than 30 anti-popes recognized over the centuries. These were usually installed by factions during disputes. For instance, during the Western Schism, along with the legitimate Roman pontiff, there was a papal court in Avignon, anti-Pope Clement VII and successors, and later in the Pisan line, each with their own popes. In earlier centuries, Roman nobility sometimes set up anti-popes against reformist popes, or the Holy Roman Emperors sponsored their own popes against ones they didn't like. Eventually, each schism got resolved and the line of anti-popes ended, but it sometimes took decades. Number 67. None of the anti-popes are counted in the canonical list of popes, though confusingly some took names that later legitimate popes also took. There's an anti-pope John the 23rd in the 15th century, not to be confused with the real John the 23rd of the 20th century. The existence of anti-popes demonstrates that the papal office was so pivotal that factions fought even over who held the title. Number 68. The papacy and science have a complex relationship. One famous clash was the Galileo affair in the 17th century. Pope Urban VIII initially was friendly with Galileo, but in 1633 Galileo was tried by the Inquisition under Urban VIII's watch for advocating heliocentrism, the idea that the Earth orbits the Sun. Deemed vehemently suspect of heresy, Galileo was forced to recant and spent the rest of his life under house arrest, an episode often cited as church opposition to science. Number 69. Only centuries later did the papacy fully reconcile with Galileo. In 1992, Pope John Paul II formally expressed regret for how the Galileo case was handled, acknowledging the errors of church officials in judging the scientific matter too harshly. Interestingly, today the Vatican has its own astronomical observatory and even a cadre of Jesuit astronomers. The papacy now embraces science in many ways. Pope Francis, for example, strongly affirms climate science in his environmental encyclical. The Galileo saga stands as a lesson in papal fallibility in non-faith matters and the importance of dialogue between faith and science. Number 70. Papal infallibility, declared in 1870, is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean a pope is incapable of sin or error in everything. It applies only when a pope formally defines a doctrine on faith or morals ex cathedra from the chair of Peter. In fact, since that definition, popes have rarely invoked infallibility. The clearest instance was in 1950 when Pope Pius XII infallibly defined the Assumption of Mary, that Mary was assumed body and soul into heaven. Number 71. Another example often considered infallible, though it occurred before 1870, was Pope Pius IX's 1854 definition of the Immaculate Conception of Mary. Most papal teachings, however, are not infallible pronouncements, but part of the ordinary magisterium, which Catholics are still meant to give respect and assent to, though they're not irreformable. Additionally, an ecumenical council in union with the people can teach infallibility. The First Vatican Council itself carefully limited infallibility by stating it's not for new revelations. It can only define what is in scripture or long-standing tradition. In practice, popes typically exercise their authority with an ear to the bishops and faithful, using infallibility only as a last resort to clarify central beliefs. Number 72. Throughout history, popes have worn distinctive regalia. One of the most striking was the papal tiara, a triple crown headpiece symbolizing the pope's authority, interpreted as the unity of his roles as father of princes and kings, ruler of the world, vicar of Christ. For nearly a millennium, new popes were crowned with the tiara in a grand coronation ceremony. However, in 1964, Pope Paul VI laid down his tiara on the altar as a sign of humility, and later donated it for charity. He was the last pope to be crowned. His successors, John Paul I and onward, opted for a simpler inauguration without a tiara. Instead, the new pope is invested with the pallium, a wood stole, as a symbol of his pastoral authority. Number 73. 83. More recently, Pope Francis even removed the tiara from his coat of arms, replacing it with a simple bishop's mitre, underscoring the papacy's shift away from royal trappings. Interestingly, Pope Benedict XVI did briefly resurrect the tiara symbol on his coat of arms, but he never wore one. Modern popes have received decorative tiaras as gifts, but they remain museum pieces. The triple tiara has thus become a historical artifact, a reminder of when popes were temporal monarchs, while the contemporary papacy emphasizes service over splendor. Number 74. The fisherman's ring is a small but significant item each pope receives. This gold ring, engraved with an image of St. Peter fishing and the pope's name, is the personal signet of the pontiff. Popes use it to seal certain official documents. Upon a pope's death or resignation, the fisherman's ring is destroyed, usually by smashing or scoring it in the presence of the cardinals. This ritual, along with the destruction of the papal seal, ensures that no one can forge documents in the late pope's name, and it symbolizes the end of that papacy. A new ring is cast for each pope. Pope Francis notably chose a gold-plated silver ring rather than a solid gold one, reflecting his frugal style. The fisherman's ring tradition highlights continuity with St. Peter the Fisherman, and its destruction highlights the transition when the See of Peter falls vacant. Number 75. Some surprising world records and facts belong to the papacy. The oldest pope in history was Leo XIII, who died in 1903 at age 93. He was also the first pope filmed on a motion picture camera in 1896. You can still watch footage of this elderly pope carried on a chair. Number 76. The youngest pope is harder to pinpoint, but the often cited one is Pope John XII, who was about 18 or 19 when elected in 955, and as noted, had a scandalous tenure. Another teen pope might be Benedict IX, possibly in his late teens or early 20s when first elected in the 11th century. The longest reigning pope was Pius IX at 31 years and 7 months, 1846 to 1878, closely followed by John Paul II at nearly 27 years. Number 77. On the flip side, the shortest papacy was a mere 13 days by Pope Urban VII in 1590, who died of malaria before coronation. Another very short one was John Paul I in 1978 with 33 days, as mentioned. These extremes show the unpredictability of the office. Number 78. In the last few centuries, popes have tended to be elected at advanced ages. The average age at election is around 65 to 70. Pope Francis was 76 at election. Pope Benedict XVI was 78, with Pope Francis turned 88 in December of 2024. The papacy in modern times often involves elderly men leading a global church. Number 79. The papacy even has a connection to space. A pope has been to the moon, sort of. The first papal astronaut doesn't exist, but the Apollo 11 astronauts in 1969 left a silicon disc on the moon containing messages from world leaders, including a prayer and blessing from Pope Paul VI. He was an enthusiastic supporter of space exploration. He famously watched the moon landing through a telescope at Castel Gandolfo and exclaimed "Bravi" to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin via televised message. The Pope's message on the lunar disc references Psalm 8, "O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth," and prays for the universe to be filled with God's glory. So, in a sense, the Pope's words are on the moon. Number 80. Furthermore, the Vatican Observatory, run by Jesuit priests, has a meteorite collection and even had an observatory in Arizona to escape Roman light pollution. It might surprise some that the popes actively engage with science. Number 81. Several popes were once married men. St. Peter, the first pope, had a wife. The Gospels mention Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law. In later centuries, at least 4 other popes had been married before ordination. For example, Pope Adrian II was married and even had his wife and daughter live with him in the Lateran Palace during his pontificate. Clerical celibacy became strictly enforced only from the Middle Ages onward. Number 82. The word nepotism comes from popes and their nephews. During the Renaissance, it was common for popes to appoint their own relatives to powerful positions, often referring to illegitimate sons as nephews. Pope Alexander VI notoriously made his teenage son a cardinal, and Pope Sixtus IV elevated 6 nephews, one just 17, to cardinal roles. This practice of favoring nipoti, Italian for nephews, led to the term nepotism in the 17th century. It was finally curbed in 1692 when Pope Innocent XII outlawed the excessive promotion of papal kin. Number 83. One pope literally sold the papacy and then reclaimed it. Pope Benedict IX, who became pontiff as a teenager in 1032, had a scandalous reign marked by immorality. He was forced out of office and returned twice thanks to his powerful family. In 1045, he actually sold the papal throne to his godfather, who became Pope Gregory VI. Benedict later regretted it and seized back the tiara, making him the only man to be pope more than once. His saga, resigning, selling the office, and returning, is unparalleled in Vatican history. Number 84. Tobacco was once grounds for excommunication in the Papal States. In the 16th and 17th centuries, several popes strictly banned the use of tobacco, then a New World novelty. In 1590, Pope Urban VII issued the world's first public smoking ban, threatening to excommunicate anyone who smoked or sniffed tobacco in church. Later, Pope Innocent X in 1650 likewise forbade tobacco in St. Peter's Basilica. These bans, aimed at decorum, legend says one pope was annoyed by sneezing from snuff during Mass, remained until 1724, when a more tobacco-friendly Pope Benedict XIII lifted the penalties. Number 85. A pope once excommunicated Halley's Comet, sort of. The Great Comet of 1456, Halley's Comet, terrified Europe, seen as an omen during a Turkish invasion. Pope Calixtus III responded by issuing a papal bull on June 29, 1456, urging Christians to pray for divine protection from the comet's evil influence. Later exaggerations claimed Calixtus actually excommunicated the comet, though in reality the bull focused on imploring God to divert the comet's wrath against the enemies of the faith, the Ottoman Turks. This colorful anecdote highlights medieval superstition and a papal willingness to address even celestial phenomena as moral threats. Number 86. 1 week in 1147 had 2 Thursdays thanks to a pope. Pope Eugene III was scheduled to arrive in Paris on a Friday, but Fridays were days of penance, no feasting for Catholics. Not wanting to dampen the celebration, Eugene III simply decreed that Friday was Thursday that week, allowing Parisians to break the fast and rejoice at the papal visit. By effectively creating an extra Thursday and no Friday in the local calendar, he gave everyone a free pass to feast. Number 87. Pope Francis once worked as a nightclub bouncer. Long before entering the seminary, he had some down-to-earth day jobs in Buenos Aires, including sweeping floors, running lab tests, and even serving as a bar bouncer. Yes, the future Pope Francis literally manned the door at a tango club, using his imposing presence to keep order. He later joked that the experience helped him know how to defend the faith. Number 88. Pope Francis became a pop culture cover star. In January 2014, Pope Francis appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, the first pontiff to ever grace the cover of the famed rock and roll publication. The cover line played off a Bob Dylan lyric, "The times they are a-changin'." It was a testament to Francis's broad appeal. That same year, he was also Time magazine's Person of the Year. Number 89. Pope Benedict XVI was a devoted cat lover. Benedict was such a fan of felines that Roman street cats would flock to him. As Cardinal Ratzinger, he often fed the stray cats in the Vatican gardens, and he was frequently seen petting cats around his residence. Vatican officials noted that when he moved into the Apostolic Palace as Pope, some furry friends tried to follow him inside. Pets aren't officially allowed in the papal apartments, much to Benedict's chagrin. He later joked about his cats and even wrote a children's story from a cat's perspective. It's said that in retirement in the Vatican Gardens monastery, Benedict finally could keep cats around. Fitting for a pope whose gentle demeanor earned him the nickname God's Rottweiler, only in irony, as he truly was more of a tender cat person. Number 90. Yes, the Pope's shoes really are red, but not Prada. Popes traditionally wear red leather shoes symbolizing the blood of martyrs. Pope Benedict XVI drew media attention for his fashionably red papal loafers, which some speculated were designer shoes by Prada. The Vatican squashed that rumor, clarifying that his red shoes were handmade by his personal cobbler in Rome, not Prada. The Pope isn't dressed by Prada, but by Christ, quipped the Vatican newspaper. Number 91. One of the Pope's ancient ancient titles is Servant of the Servants of God. Among the Pope's many titles, which include Bishop of Rome, Pontifex Maximus, Vicar of Christ, etc., this humble formula stands out. It was first extensively used by Pope Gregory I, Gregory the Great, around 600 AD as a lesson in humility. Nearly every papal document now includes the Latin phrase Servus Servorum Dei. Despite the grandeur of the papal office, the Pope is meant to be foremost a servant. Number 92. When a pope dies, a ritual verifies his death with a call and a tap. Traditionally, the papal chamberlain gently taps the deceased pope's forehead 3 times with a small silver hammer, while calling his baptismal name repeated thrice. Upon no response, the pope is officially declared dead. Their death is then publicly announced, and arrangements are begun for the funeral and conclave. This custom, along with the destruction of the fisherman's ring, is part of centuries-old protocol to ensure the pope has truly passed. In modern practice, medical confirmation is of course paramount, but the ceremonial aspect endures. Number 93. The Pope's summer palace has a farm and is now a museum. For centuries, popes escaped Rome's summer heat at the Apostolic Palace of Castel Gandolfo, a hilltop estate 15 miles south of Rome. The 135-acre property boasts sprawling gardens and even a working dairy farm that supplied the Vatican with fresh milk, eggs, and produce. However, Pope Francis broke tradition by never using it for summers. He preferred to stay in the Vatican. In 2016, Francis opened the palace and gardens to the public as a museum and park. Now, visitors can tour the once private papal bedrooms and stroll the Barberini Gardens. The papal farm, with cows and chickens, still operates. Its goods are sold in the Vatican store, making for perhaps the holiest cheese and eggs one can buy. Number 94. Pope John Paul II had a secret life in the theater. In Nazi-occupied Poland, the future John Paul II co-founded an underground theatrical troupe called the Rhapsodic Theater. They performed Polish plays in a clandestine apartment setting, risking their lives to preserve Polish culture under German bans. He was both an actor and a playwright. He memorized entire roles and performed while Nazi patrols roamed outside. Amazingly, even when a truck blaring Nazi propaganda passed during one secret show, he didn't break character or pause his lines. His passion for drama and literature endured. Later, as a young priest, he wrote plays and poems. It's fitting that this one-time actor would become a pope who understood the power of language and symbol, who charismatically performed the liturgy on the world stage. Number 95. A pope's influence can even reshape the calendar and clocks. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar, correcting the old Julian calendar by dropping 10 days in October to realign with the solar year, a reform now used worldwide. Number 96. And in 1945, Pope Pius XII introduced a tiny time tweak. He abolished the centuries-old tradition of Roman time, where church bells and clocks reset at sunset in the Vatican, adopting standard mean time. Thus, the Pope literally changed timekeeping in his domain. While not as famous as Gregory's calendar, which we all live by, it shows that from global dates to local daily schedules, the papacy has left its mark on how humanity measures time. Thankfully, there's no more adjusting your watch at sundown in St. Peter's Square. Number 97. Let's talk a little bit more about that papal football team from earlier. Vatican City fields an unofficial national soccer team comprised of Swiss guards, Vatican staff, and museum workers. They play occasional friendly matches in sky blue and yellow kits against local Italian teams. While not part of FIFA, Vatican XI has even faced off against the likes of Monaco and a team of Roma priests. Number 98. Popes are usually avid football fans too. Pope John Paul II played goalie in his youth, and Pope Francis is a lifelong supporter of Argentina's San Lorenzo club. In 2014, Francis even received a personalized San Lorenzo jersey after they won Argentina's championship. So while the Vatican might be the world's smallest state, its love of football looms large, proving that even popes can get a kick out of the beautiful game. Number 99. Even the Pope's car license plates start with SCV1. The Pope's vehicle in Vatican City bears the registration SCV1, which is basically Latin for Vatican City State. The Pope mobiles and official cars are all numbered sequentially, SCV2, SCV3, etc., but numero uno is reserved for the pontiff's ride. Number 100. Beyond that, the Vatican has some unique transport quirks. It's the only country where the railway station lies just within the city walls with tracks leading out. And though Vatican City is tiny, popes historically had grand travel options, from the gestatorial chair or carried throne of olden days to the armored Mercedes popemobiles of today. The SCV-1 plate is a small reminder that even on the road, the pope is in a class of his own. And that, folks, is 100 facts about the pope. We hope you enjoyed. Let us know about which fact you found the most interesting down in the comments, and make sure you like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.